Welcome to Women Leading on Climate podcast. I'm Catherine McKenna. Let's be real. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by climate headlines right now, but it's super important to remember that real progress is happening and women are often leading it. Here on this podcast, I talk to fearless women climate leaders from Canada and around the world who are stepping up and digging in. I ask how they view this moment, what they're focused on, and our opportunities for action, and personal things like what they do to get away from it all. Today, I'm really happy to be speaking with Ingrid Reumert. Ingrid is the Senior Vice President, Global Stakeholder Relations at Ørsted, which, as we all probably know, is the global leader in offshore wind. Among other things, Ingrid is responsible for policy and regulatory affairs, a super easy file, especially navigating complex frameworks within energy and climate. She's also responsibility for the sustainability strategy and is well known for transforming sustainability ambition into real climate action. She's here to share her insights, her ideas for this moment, and her unwavering drive for real climate action inside business. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Well, okay, we always start the podcast by asking how you doing? It's a tough moment on climate. There are strong headwinds. So how are you holding up?
No, it's a good question. I think I'm worried in terms of where we are going the planet is going, where we're going as a society, for future generations, the loss of nature, loss of biodiversity, our inability to stay on the 1.5 degree track. So I've got that kind of what I call long-term or deep worry, particularly when I think of my children. But at the same time, I'm a fighter, right? So
You are.
and a lot of the women that you've got on this fantastic podcast are fighters, right? And it's always been what I've been doing my entire life is to try to find creative solutions to super difficult challenges. And I like a difficult challenge, and this is exactly where we are at the moment. So I think it can't be more meaningful than fighting for climate and for the energy transition than it is now, because it's difficult, right? And I think in particular for offshore wind within our sector, and we'll get more into that. And for Ørsted as a company, we've got this fantastic transformation story behind us, where we basically transformed from being one of the most fossil fuel intensive utilities in Europe to now being a fully green company, and being the global market leader within offshore wind. But that hasn't been easy to do that transformation. And for sure, the offshore wind sector has also been through some headwinds lately, but that doesn't mean we should give up, quite the contrary.
You know what? I love it that you say you're a fighter, because that's how I feel. You can't give up in this moment. It means you got to dig in, and you got to step up, and you got to fight for what's right. And you're right. Many women on this, all the women on this podcast, but the members, women leading on climate globally, they're all fighters. Okay, so let's dig in. I do think it's really fascinating how Ørsted has transformed, as you say, very fossil fuel intensive, to clean energy. And that's amazing, because I think that's a great story of what everyone else could do if you dig in and you set clear goals. But let's talk kind of about the renewable story, because clearly it's true. The world is off track. We are not on track for 1.5. But how are you, the renewable story? I don't think we talk about it enough, and what has happened in the decades since the Paris Agreement. So could you talk about that? And also offshore wind, how does that fit into the story?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think we talk a lot about the problems and the challenges, and because we have to do that, because we have to solve them. But renewables has really reached this tipping point, or past a tipping point, because in many countries around the world, it's a fully competitive, commercially viable solution to new electricity production. And we see, of course, different pace around the world. So some countries are, 110 kilometers an hour and have got very clear targets. They might also have some market fundamentals. And other countries are, of course, more hesitant. So there is we work a lot with this concept of regional decarbonization. We don't believe that we're just going to see this uniform decarbonization like we maybe thought a few years back. We've all seen those curves that are going to transform our energy system and where we all go towards net zero. But I believe that the picture we see is more diversified now and with different regional dynamics. But and the reason why it's so important is, of course, because energy production is around 75% of our global emissions. And we do need to transform the energy system. It's not enough just to add new green electrons. We also need to transform from the fossil fuel intensive production over to the green electricity production. We see solar and wind really picking up. Just last year, 2024, in Europe was the first time ever that solar and wind overtook fossil fuel sources in terms of electricity production in Europe.
So that is amazing. Like that is massive.
It's massive, and it's an amazing milestone that probably we don't talk that much about because we focus on the problems like that we still, of course, have that lie ahead of us. And we've all also heard the story of other parts of the world where solar has got its own momentum, and where there's also, of course, a lot of onshore wind being put up. For offshore wind, when we look at Europe as an example, again, it doesn't matter what projection you believe in or what kind of analysis you're looking at. We can see very clearly that offshore wind will be around 1/5 to 1/4 of the future energy mix in Europe towards 2050. There's no way around offshore wind in for the European markets, basically because of the energy and electricity that we need, but also because we don't have fossil resources to the extent that we could cover the needs of Europe. And then I believe again what has happened recently is that maybe before and also all the way back to the Paris Agreement, and also all the way back to the very infamous COP15 in Copenhagen that some of the old timers will remember. The energy transition has been driven very much by the climate movement and also by an ideological support to combating climate change. I think what we're seeing now over the past year or two is that it's becoming, both because of the business reasons that I explained before, that it's commercially viable, it becomes less bipartisan, I think you say in English. So it becomes less dependent on where you are on the political spectrum, both because it has proved itself, it makes good sense, but also because of the energy security dimension and the resilience dimension, that it just makes good sense to have homegrown energy resources that you can control and where you're not dependent on importing energy from other parts of the world. So there is clearly a momentum for renewables.
I look at it as you're saying this, I see the sign behind you that says
Exactly.
Green energy equals secure energy. And you're right. I think that's really interesting that, thanks to environmentalists, we have to be thankful that they have really been driving a lot of the action. But the good news now is that we have, as we say in my world, non-state actors, but we have corporations, financial institutions, cities and regions, not all of them, but many of them, who are really supporting government action. And it's about far more than just an environmental thing. As I say, climate is the thing. I should have my mug here because it's an everything thing, including it's an energy security thing, and it's a business opportunity thing, and an innovation thing, and a growth thing. And as you say, like also very important, it's the future for our kids thing. So
exactly.
So maybe you could talk about the business community more broadly. So I issued a report at COP30 that talks about first of all, the role of the Paris Agreement, that yes, we are still far off, largely because of a lack of leadership by governments to meet the commitments they have set for themselves. But I talk about how the past decade has been transformational. Net zero did not exist as a concept 10 years ago. Now we have around 80% of the world's GDP covered by net zero. And we have folks who are really stepping up, because we know having a net zero target is certainly not enough. You have to have short-term targets, and you have to do real things. Like you need to reduce your emissions in the short term. You need to transform money from, fossil fuels to clean, which we've certainly seen. Ørsted is a great example of. Maybe you could talk about that, like what you're seeing in the business community, because I think sometimes right now, like we sometimes like we're very fixed on the one moment. Like I think in a decade we've seen this transformation, as you said. Like now it's a business issue, it's an energy security issue, and business leaders are stepping up. Of course, women often, they may not be the CEOs or world leaders, but they're often the ones who are sitting in the board rooms or the cabinet rooms. I assume like both you and me, speaking up. But just talk like, what is going on with business right now, 10 years after the Paris Agreement with net zero commitments? What are you seeing?
But business have understood the message, I think, of the importance of climate change and integrating both, you could say, the risks, but also the opportunities that this unfortunate change of our societies and maybe of our planet will bring also for businesses. So I think all businesses that are run in a responsible manner have plans for adaptation, mitigation, etc. And that is also where the discussion is in the boardroom. Where it, of course, becomes interesting is that where is the business opportunity? And businesses are all about stability, about, of course, growth, about certainty for your investment and getting that return of investment. So if there's one thing that we don't like in business is when it becomes too volatile, unpredictable, stop go. We certainly don't like, because we invest either out of our own pockets or out of our shareholders or other investors' pockets, and we need to have that long-term view and a high degree of certainty that investment is going to pay off. And of course, what is tricky with the energy transition is that it's a system transformation. It's not just a question of adding one extra additional new technology. It's the whole system that needs to change. And that is why advocacy is so important in making it happen. And not least, of course, the partnership between the private sector and our governments, authorities, etc., whether it's a federal level or state level, etc. Because it all starts with the frameworks that we have for the energy system to evolve and for our industry. And here we have to think in a different way. The old system is not fit for purpose. Basically, the old system, the system that we have to think in new, innovative ways. We work with a concept called regulatory innovation. We often talk about
I love
innovation.
it. I'm like a policy nerd, so I'm like super into regulatory innovation.
Exactly, because often we talk about innovation is about inventing this new technology, or maybe it's inventing a new business model. But regulators and policymakers also have to think in an innovative way and cross some boundaries that they haven't done so far. And I can give you an example of that. All countries think within the boundaries of the nation state that they're responsible for, right? All governments do that. That's how countries are formed or were formed. But when you look at renewable energy, since we are working with natural resources, you have to think in a different manner across boundaries, just like you do when you need to solve an environmental problem. So it makes sense that the governments who are tapping into the same renewable resources, like, for example, the wind resource in the North Sea, they collaborate so that they work together on what kind of political frameworks do we want to have, how do we want these investments to come in, and what kind of process do we want around tenders or give out these awards to build big offshore wind farms, which are massive infrastructure projects at sea. And not least, how can we give businesses the certainty that I spoke about in the beginning, so that the whole supply chain can start ramping up, so we actually get to build those factories where we can employ people, develop new skills, etc. So governments have to step out a little bit out of their comfort zone and collaborate bilaterally or multilaterally in a different way. And also sometimes take a role where they are facilitators, making, for example, another great example of that is helping industry or the society to come out of the hen and the egg challenge, which we have in the energy transition, which we've had for decades. What drives the energy transition? Do we need more renewables, or do we need more demand for renewables? And of course, both supply and demand needs to move in parallel. And that is super challenging. But here governments can really step in and have that facilitating or convening role and bring those parts of society together, both the producers of green electricity and the ones who need to demand it and will have to transform their practices, and bring them together and create some frameworks around that. And we've seen that recently in the EU with the so-called tripartite contracts that they have entered here recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great to see what is going on in the EU, but in other places, China. I do a lot of work in Singapore. And I mean, I was minister, right? And I realized that with the business community, like people are like, oh, some people, and I'm not going to say who, but some people are like, we don't like regulation. And I said, but regulation, for example, a price on pollution. So Canada, we have one. We fortunately had a consumer price, which was hard. We lost that because of sadly opposition. But we have a price on heavy emitters, and that just creates it creates the framework for making decisions to invest in clean, because obviously there's a cost of pollution, and we got to make sure that people understand the cost, so they decide, oh, okay, it makes sense to, in the short, medium, long term, to invest in clean solutions to reduce paying a price on pollution. And as I say to folks, like certainty is so critically important to business. It's quite challenging in this moment, because I think with polarization, and to be honest, in my view, often a lack of leadership at the national level, that makes it a lot harder. But I want to pick on one thing you said, because I have this report. I've been working for the UN Secretary General. I issued this third report. And one of the things that when we set out what is integrity in terms of net zero, we say it's, not lobbying against climate action, but what we need to see the business community. When you're a minister like me trying to do things, you actually need positive lobbying, because there are entrenched interests that will lobby against things that we need to do action on climate, even things that, to be honest, are very, in a way, business focused, like putting a price on pollution and providing certainty. So, I mean, maybe just a second, maybe it's just something I really think is important, because everyone needs to support, if you want climate action, you got to support the political leaders who are doing it. The idea of positive lobbying, because I think, and it sometimes, like, businesses say to me, like, oh, we lobbied. And I was like, yeah, I need sometimes you to go out and actually say this policy makes sense from a business perspective, not because it's a good policy or progressive or whatever, just like from a business perspective. So there are voices that say, yeah, we actually need this. And so I don't know, you don't need to go on for a long bit, but I keep on emphasizing this to businesses who care about climate action. I say, well, you got to reinforce, political leaders who are trying to do hard things to say, actually, this is positive.
Yeah, but I think you're spot on and right down my alley, because I always thought that working as a climate leader, as a business or within that field, it has to be two-sided. It's about what you're doing within your own company, within your supply chain, with your customers, but you're also part of a system, an ecosystem. So it's also about what you say and how you act externally. And to your point, I think, and back to the Paris Agreement, I think one of the reasons why we got that agreement was that strong business voices stepped forward, and you remember, and you were there, stepped forward and gave that backing and say, this is doable. And actually, there might even be a business opportunity in it. We can decrease our risk, and there might be value, longer term value for companies in it. So I think the leaders that are ready to step forward within the policy domain, they need the backing from voices from business. And also often they need, you could say, the facts. How would this actually work? What is the impact? How should it be constructed, et cetera, et cetera. And back to my nation state point before, it's also often businesses who has got the knowledge of what is happening across the different markets. Because again, as a national politician, you might have the view, everything about what's going on in your country. And of course, you've got a lot of bilateral talks, and you're part of different international associations. But we can provide, you could say, politicians with a view across what has worked within our sector across the markets where offshore wind has been successful. We know the recipe.
Yeah.
How do you attract investments, and how do you actually get those large infrastructure wind farms, offshore wind farms? How do you actually get them built? We know what works, and that can be, of course, of high value for the policy makers to be able to take that step forward. And
we may need to, because I should
decisions.
say, this podcast is it's an initiative of Women Leading on Climate, the Canadian chapter, and I know there's a lot of interest in Canada, including by our province of Nova Scotia, in offshore wind. But you need examples, like whether or not it's Ørsted or whomever is doing it, you need to understand, like, these are complex things to get outcomes. Like, you don't just say, boom, it's all going to happen. Like, there are regulatory frameworks, but there's investments, there's the technology, the supply chain. So there's a whole bunch. So that's amazing. I do want to take a moment to give a shout out to two women in the business sector who are stepping up across, country lines. Maria Mendelucci, head of the We Mean Business Coalition. She really played a really important role, and We Mean Business played a really important role in getting, for the first time, recognition that we need to, we need to triple renewables, and also we need to phase out fossil fuels, and getting businesses to speak up. That is really, really important. We saw that at COP28. And also Mindy Lubber in the United States, who's head of Ceres. Like, she's been out there saying, like, this is freedom to invest. This is about, your responsibility as a company, your fiduciary obligations, a whole bunch of things. I think that I have to give a shout out to these women that are bringing together a cross section of businesses who understand that the energy transition is a real opportunity, and not acting on climate is a real business risk. So shout out to those women. Okay, we're going to totally change tack now. So we're just going to be like, okay, it's really hard working on climate. Let's just be honest some days. I know we commiserate, you and me and others. So how do you get away from it all? Because I think it's really important. Like, it's okay if you need to take a break. I go out and I try to, sometimes it's very cold, so I have to go to a pool, but my safe space, or just my place to get away from all, no one can reach me, is doing open water swimming. I talk about it a lot. What about you? What do you do when you just want to clear your head?
Yeah, you're right. I think self-care is a very important concept when you work within climate, and for sure when you work within the offshore wind space. We've had a lot on our plate lately. It hasn't been easy. It's been a lot of late nights, etc. So to me, it is family, spending time with my family, with my kids, because with children you just have to switch off. You have to.
How old are your kids, Ingrid?
9 and 15. So
okay.
Getting older, but I still have a 9-year-old.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great age. It's a great age.
It's a wonderful age. So
9, they really still love you and think you're amazing. Sometimes at 15, I've gone through 3 15-year-olds. You're not always the coolest.
You're not always the most
you need to be
amazing.
around. No. You need to be around, and they come around generally.
Yeah, exactly. But nine, there's still a lot of the Lego and all that kind of thing. But I think family first for sure. Then I know I do need my sleep. If I don't, I can work and work and work, but too many days with too little sleep, then I'm not the best version of myself. So I need to get that in, and then really some fresh air. I go running, and someone told me that what I do is called naked running. I'm not naked when I run.
That sounds interesting.
It gets the wrong visual. But I run without anything. No music, no stopwatch, stop, go, no pulse, this and that, or Strava tracking anything, because I don't need to be paced by anything, because I'm paced enough, I think, in my daily job. I just need headspace and some fresh air. And I don't mind if it's dark or if it's ice cold. I just wear my woolies and the different blinking lights on. I enjoy that a lot, and it's just me with my running shoes, and no one talks to me until I get home.
You know what?
I don't even bring my phone. No,
but I mean, that is literally key. That is why open water swimming for me, like, not having to pace, not having to measure distance, just going, and no one can reach you. No one can reach you, and you can reach no one, and you don't have to read an email and say, oh my gosh, or a text, or God knows what channels, everyone's like reaching out to you. You can just
Exactly.
ignore it. And that's great.
Exactly.
Naked
And I
running.
will add one more thing that's a little bit down the same line, but unfortunately, I can only do it a few times a year. I love cross country skiing. I just love it. I can't do that so much in Denmark, but we often go to Norway. We've got a small cabin up there, and it's a little bit the same concept. I'm on my own, peace and quiet, beautiful white winter landscape. I'm in my head thinking, but at the same time, you got the exercise going, so it gives you energy, and it's just the best. I come home refreshed with a big smile on, and I just love it. So
I love that
that's
too.
important.
I love it too. So that's why we
Wonderful.
also need to tackle climate change, because otherwise we
Yeah.
will have no snow.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get back to it. So you are a woman in, I would imagine, a largely male dominated sector. You're a very strong woman. You speak out. Maybe talk about that, because I think, it can be tough. Like, I felt sometimes I'm at a table and I'm the only woman, and then, they're like, oh God, is she going to talk about climate change again? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to talk about climate change again. But maybe just talk about, like, your experience, and also like seeing women in these situations, and how you've seen like them leading as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I've only worked in male dominated sectors. I've worked a lot in politics. I worked in defense, the building
Wow.
industry, and then now in energy. So it's kind of my place, and I actually really really enjoy it. I am, you could say, lucky working for Ørsted, because it's, of course, it's expected that what I bring to the table is around clean energy, offshore wind, etc. So I'm labeled before you could say I go into the room. But I think what I see within this space now is actually quite a big change compared to just 5 or 10 years ago. And it has, of course, been coming, I think, over the past few years. But there was actually this moment, and you and I were at the same meeting in New York during New York Climate Week, where it suddenly dawned on me, because we sat in this roundtable meeting with a lot of high-level people from business, from UN, etc. And then at one side of this small roundtable, I don't know, 12, 14 people around the room, there was just this fantastic lineup of strong women who all work within the climate and
It
energy
was
space.
amazing. It was
It
amazing.
was,
Like, at the top levels, it was all women. I'm like, this
yes.
almost
And I was
never
like,
happens.
wow, it didn't used to ever be like that. And just to name, it was yourself, it was Teresa Ribera, Executive Vice President from the Commission. It was Sando Jambo from the UN Global Compact. And it was Anna Tony from the COP30 CEO. And it was all like that. And I was sitting a little, and I was looking at all this, yes, here
But
we
you were
are.
at the table
I
too.
was
Like, it
there
was,
too. I was at the
I
table, but
know.
I
And
had a
I'm
man in
like,
between. There was a guy in
I
between.
know. And he was in the minority, by
No, okay.
far the minority. But
Exactly.
I think
And I
it
thought,
is
wow,
energizing to see that.
yes, because it of course, one thing is, you see your own gender and representation and all that, but it was more about the agency that we have, and the strong female leaders that we have within this space. And also, I think that women have stepped in, are not no longer, you could say, in the softer space, where I think also just 10, 15 years ago, as soon as you started talking softer sustainability topics, then the room would be full of women. But when it was more your kind of energy, policy, that kind of discussion, and suddenly there would be no women. And now I don't see that distinction anymore. I think women are all over and are at the table, right? And it's just so important. And that's why also I'm a big fan of your initiative. What part of it is, of course, the gender angle, but it is because women, we have agency, and here is really a massive potential to keep on creating that change that we very much need, if we can fuel that agency that women already have. And then, of course, I think, as I also shared with you, within our own company, we have gender targets, etc. We're progressing well, maybe not quickly enough. You could debate that, but I think it's also important for us to show as a company that this is serious. It's not just a target that we have put up. We actually have plans in place to improve, and we find this important. That this, and being part of this initiative of yours, is testament to that. And then the final reason why I think it's so important, it goes back to my 15-year-old, wonderful, beautiful daughter. And when I look at the world that they are growing up in and the expectations that there is today for our young women in terms of how they should look, how they should behave, how they should perform, etc., I'm thinking it must be really, really hard to be a young girl today. And then I think about, wow, this is really not what it's about. To me, it's about creating that meaningful change in the world. It's not about how you look or, how you kind of position yourself and all that. It is really about creating that meaningful change. And I think we have to show that also to the next generation, because it will be their battle to fight. We are not going to be able to finalize this super important work. There will be a lot to do for the next generation. So them having some credible role models, I think, is important.
Well, I've got to say, you're an incredible role model. I've met so many amazing women at Ørsted. Yes, they're amazing men too, but I'm working with a lot of amazing women. And your point about what is important, and I think role modeling to the next generation who are already there, who care about climate, are trying to figure things out. I remember being there. My book, Running Like a Girl, is like when I was trying to figure out how do you make change, and then being so inspired by later on when I got into politics and working on climate, seeing these amazing women. I think that's really important. And I know like they're going to do different things and they're going to take different approaches, but really realizing what is important to making change. It's not how you look. It's what you do and how you do it with integrity. And also how you get away from it all, because it's like nonstop for these young women. Like, at least I grew up in a stage where we didn't have, phones. We had at one point when we had mobile phones, they were pretty old school. So, but anyway, Ingrid, I want to say that you are inspiring. You're inspiring as a business leader, but you're really inspiring as a woman leading on climate. So I want to thank you. I wish we were hanging out together, but if we were hanging out together, the question I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
What song would you ask me to blare on my stereo? Which sounds very old school, but I still have kind of a stereo.
And it's now I have to reveal that I'm one of those who sings in the car.
Amazing.
That's what I do. I put the music up loud and I sing in the car. And I was like, oh, she's going to ask me that question, what I'm going to say. And I like a lot of kind of ear hangers, good pop music. But I always keep on going back to it. It's like when you get a bit older, you go back to certain moments in your life. And I go back to always when I met my husband down in Brussels 15 years ago. We loved the band that we still do. It's called The Killers.
The Killers! Oh, that is awesome.
I still love them. And they've got many good songs. And I think maybe my favorite is the one that's called Mr. Brightside, because it's got such a great energy to it. And music like that, I had a hard day, get into the car. I've got around 10 minutes home, so I'm very fortunate I could actually cycle if I didn't have to drop off kids in the morning. But then get music on, put it on loud, and then when I come home, I'm ready to check in with the family.
Well, that is awesome. Well, thank you, Ingrid. You're the best. It's really great chatting with you. And I know people listening to this, in particular women, will feel really inspired. So thank you for everything you do. And looking forward to blaring The Killers in person sometime soon. See you later.
Do that. Thank you so much. See you.
Thanks, Ingrid. You've been listening to the Women Leading on Climate podcast. I'm your host, Catherine McKenna. Thanks to the McConnell Foundation for helping make this happen. And until next time, be brave, speak up, and keep on pushing forward on climate.